All right, 5 minutes on the subject of whether or not photons, light, is bent twice as much as regular matter by gravity, let alone bent at all. The story starts with the Eddington experiment done to prove Einstein's theory of relativity. And so, as I understand the story, this was mostly all Eddington's idea, and and he was an aggressive, one of the first defenders of Einstein's theory of relativity. So he went in with a bit of a bias. Now, in his journal, it's just a fact, he states, so you'll have to accept my testimony, all right, I'm not lying about it, because I can't find his journal online anymore, but he states right explicitly in his journal that the weather's terrible, that he got 10% of the data quality. That is, he was expecting going in to get 10,000 stars per glass slide, and he only got 1,000. So a huge degrade in the data quality. It wasn't a 12 noon eclipse, it was something after 1 o'clock, and the weather was horrible. Okay, so it rained a lot, okay, which means that the seeing was also bad in the worst kind of way, which is a bunch of water molecules in between you and space, which is even worse than just clouds. But anyway, so not the kind of experiment you write a New York Times headline saying Einstein proven right. He said right in his journal, I wouldn't stake my life on these results. That's an absolute fact. All right, so this isn't the kind of experiment that you say, okay, we proved it. And then all the other experiments and eclipses, there was one in 1922, and then somewhere in the 50s they tried again, and every single one of them was flawed. Now there was 2 expeditions that went with Eddington. So Eddington had the horrible weather. Unfortunately, the people that went to South America, I think that was South America, they didn't adjust the telescope correctly. So their images weren't too good either. Right, so it didn't go well at all. You're talking about 12-foot long telescopes dragged up mountaintops. The whole thing seemed a marginal experiment even under the best conditions, and they had the absolute worst. Now, I'd argue that isn't good science. You don't take an experiment that flawed and make it a foundation for a statement about what's been proven, okay? And then the fact that they could never repeat it, all right, since Eddington, the experiment hasn't been done by a competent telescope, a big one, okay, beyond the margin of error, so it's just not a proven fact by that particular experiment. Now, the best part of the experiment is that it's an optical experiment, so it doesn't rely on scatter. So scatter won't produce image. So the other kind of satellite experiments they've done where they've called it measuring bending, those all include light that does go through the corona of the suns, and light that goes through globular clusters, and light that goes through all kinds of other messes. The whole idea of Eddington was he had to pick a star well outside a diameter of the sun, at least a radius. And I think it was a full diameter. So he had to pick a star that was pretty far from the sun, because there's every expectation that inside of that distance there's plenty of particles to cause scatter, and scatter will create bending in all directions. So from any place you could see the light, so to speak. So all the radio telescope experiments are disqualified because they're not image experiments. So the experiment really hasn't been repeated. And the fact is there's 400 times better resolution in space. Even the fact that, look, with all the telescopes, so since 1919, I'm supposed to believe that with all the telescopes on Earth, all the observatories, there hasn't been a single one that had a nice noonish eclipse happen over the top of it. Not one. I'm sort of out of time, shucks. Anyway, so space is 400 times better resolution. You don't need an eclipse. It's a 5-minute experiment, and it's even more than 400 times when you figure out that most of these eclipses aren't 12 noon eclipses, so it's not ideal conditions. So we're talking about 600 times better resolution from space. And we're supposed to believe it's never interested NASA to bother pointing a GoPro camera at the surface of Jupiter, because the fact is, with 500 times better resolution, you could use the surface of Jupiter. All right, anyway, that's my argument.